Hey VC, this is Jonathan, your cheap and cheerful record collector. Today I'm doing the vinyl tag for 2018. Got a lot to get through, so I think we should just jump right in. First question is the first video you ever watched. I was on YouTube looking around for records and stuff, and I tagged, it was just a while ago, I went in, put 33 RPM in, and this guy came up called 33 RPM, Vinyl Gear and More out of Canada. Watch his videos for a while. He always does like 6 or 8 minute videos. Some interesting stuff. So from him, I sort of branched out and found other people. But that was really the first video I watched. Favorite record discovered on the VC. I'm not going to say I discovered it. I'm going to say I rediscovered it. It's a band I knew about, but had sort of gone by the wayside and forgotten about until I saw them on the VC. And that would be Savoy Brown. And this particular record is Looking In. Really happy to get turned on to them again from the VC, so Savoy Brown. Other hobbies, I do some photography. Gotten out of it recently, so I hope to get back into it as the weather warms up a little bit. Why start collecting? When I was growing up, that's the only way you had to have records. Either records or listen to the radio. If you wanted to hear a particular song, you had to go buy it. And I really wasn't into 45s. I never saw the reason to buy one song, when I could buy an album which had 8 or 10 songs on it. So I was always buying LPs. And through the years, as you move, as you get divorced, etc., records come and records go. And finally, about 15 years ago, I sold everything I had. At that point, about 1,000 albums. And then about 5 years ago, unfortunately, a good friend of mine passed away. And his partner called me up a couple of months later and said, I got about 6 boxes of records here that I know Alan would want you to have. So I took those 6 boxes of records, and that started my obsession again. And now I'm up to about 2,100 albums. Do you play an instrument? I used to play a little bit of saxophone in high school, but never played in a band, and I haven't kept up with it. Ever work at a record store? Don't know why, but never did. Album from the year you were born. Well, I'm a lot older than most of you people. I was born in 1949. The first 33 LP was released in 1948. So I did some research, and I found this guy had released a couple albums in 1949. So if I had the album, this would be my favorite album from then, and it would be Django Reinhardt, the great gypsy guitar player. So he released an album in 1949, so if I could find it, that would be my album. Classic they never heard. You might find this hard to believe, but it's true. I've never heard Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Okay, there it is. Guilty pleasure. Guilty pleasure is more like a guilty genre, and that would be Broadway show tunes. I'm not talking about movie soundtracks, talking about Broadway show tunes. This one I picked out is a show called Eubie, which was from the 1970s. He was a piano player and composer. He wrote a number of shows that were performed, usually not on Broadway, but in Harlem, and also done around the country, probably in Chicago, Boston, Washington, D.C., etc., to mostly black audiences. He had a lyricist named Sisler, Noble Sisler, and the two of them wrote lots of shows together. In 1978, they did a review of all his music on Broadway called Eubie. The song you might know is I'm Just Wild About Harry, which is a very popular, famous song. This show had Gregory Hines and Maurice Hines in the show, and they tap danced and sang, and it was pretty spectacular. So that's my guilty pleasures, Broadway show tunes. Strangest record is a record called Atomic Cafe. After the first atomic bomb was dropped by the United States on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, after that, everything was atomic. You had atomic restaurants, atomic cafes, atomic songs, etc. So this album it was a documentary actually originally. And it says radioactive rock and roll, blues, country, and gospel. So you have songs on here like Jesus Hits Like an Atom Bomb by Lowell Blanchard and the Valley Trio. The Atomic Sermon by Billy Hughes and the Rhythm Buckaroos. Old Man Adam by Sons of the Pioneers. Atomic Cocktail. Satellite Baby, Atomic Bomb Baby. So, and also have little snippets from Harry Truman, Winston Churchill, etc., etc. So, very strange, but some great stuff on here. Atomic Cafe. Picture disc. I don't really collect picture discs, but these I have a number of. This is something called the Vogue picture disc, or they call it the Vogue picture record. They were done in the 1940s, 78s. Company was only in business for 1 year. This one's called Out Where the Wild Wind Blows with Kenny Roberts, accompanied by the Down Homers. And the flip side is Who's Gonna Kiss You When I'm Gone. I have about 4 of these. There are books on them, and you can look up. They also can find them on eBay. But there's whole books on all the different titles they put out. Most people collect them for the cover, for the records themselves, not for the music. Music's pretty corny. But yeah, Vogue picture discs. Posthumous record. Without a doubt, one of my favorites was poor Janis Joplin and Pearl. This was released right after she passed away. Actually, the song Mercedes-Benz was recorded 3 days before she died. So, a great, great album by a great singer, Janis Joplin, Pearl. Artists I collect impulsively. This is a guy I grew up with. My dad always played this music in the house. I always heard it from the time I could remember. And now whenever I see it, if it's in good condition, I'll pick it up. And it's Frank Sinatra. The one I picked up today is The Voice on Columbia. And great, great record. One of the best singers of the 20th century, for sure. Frank Sinatra. Blind Buy. Blind Buy because I didn't know this album. I knew the artist vaguely. And I didn't know he put out any solo albums. When I saw it, I grabbed it. And it's Jimmy Carl Black, who used to play with the Mothers of Invention. I think he's on the first 3 or 4 albums with Frank Zappa. And this is Jimmy Carl Black and the Manish Boys, and this is A Little Dabble Do Ya. This almost got my favorite cover also, but I went with something else. But great record. Love that rockabilly rock and roll. Blind Spot artists, an artist I don't know why I never got into them. They were always around. I knew they existed. I never really listened to them much. And when I finally took the plunge, I was really excited. I have like 3 of their albums now. And that's the Blasters. Again, with the rockabilly, rock and roll. Love that stuff. This is live at London, live at the venue in London. And a great little record. So, the Blasters. Favorite cover. I went for jazz this time. And my favorite cover is a cover by one of my favorite artists, Sonny Rollins. And this doesn't really have a name. It's just Sonny Rollins Volume 2. Blue Note 1558. And it's so iconic that Joe Jackson actually copied the exact cover for one of his albums. So, my favorite cover. Just great. Musician you met. About 15 years ago or so, I used to own a clothing store here in Portland, Maine. And I carried basically retro and rockabilly type clothing. And one day, I'm in the store, and who would walk in but George Thorogood. He had 2 of his guys with him because he was playing a show in town that night. So he hung out for about an hour. We did a lot of talking about music. And he finally left, and about an hour later, one of the guys came back, and George had signed this for me and brought it back to the store. So that was really nice of him to take the time to sign it and send the guy back with that. So I really appreciated that. So, George Thorogood. Sentimental value. Willie Nelson, Stardust. A good friend of mine unfortunately passed away. Actually, 32 years ago this month, in a stupid accident, he was killed. And he played this record for me for the first time, and he loved this. I knew nothing about Willie Nelson up until that time. So now every time I hear this album, I think of my good friend Bob. Favorite no one else knows. Anybody knows this, I'd be very surprised. It's a band out of New York from the 1970s. They're called the Central Park Sheiks. They play swing, gypsy, country, jazz. Just great. Here's a picture of them in Central Park. And they do stuff like, by Gershwin, I Was Doing All Right, Stomping at the Savoy by Benny Goodman. They also do Honeysuckle Rose by Fats Waller, San Antonio Rose, Bob Wills. They do a lot of different stuff, but just a great, great record. Like I said, I'd be really surprised if anybody knew the Central Park Sheiks. Great stuff. And then a genre I don't know much about, which would be music out of Africa. I picked this up just because I thought the cover was cool, and I really like it. It's The Warrior, and it's by Lippi Ntombe, featuring Margaret Singana. And great African music, great drums, great percussion stuff, great rhythms, and wonderful record. So there you go. That's my Vinyl Tag 2018. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some things you didn't know before. And if you want to leave any comments, I'd love to hear from people. I'm up to almost 200 subs now, which I find mind-boggling. But I really appreciate people looking and watching my videos and making comments down below. And I'm looking forward to seeing your Vinyl Tags from 2018. I watched a couple of them already, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. Okay, so until next time, peace.